Alright. I'm live now. Hi, Chris. Oh, goodness gracious, dude. So I have finished this top 50 thing. It's done, right? I edited it, like all the audio is good. It just needs to be put with video now. So that's ready to start video editing. That took frickin' forever. But the bad thing about it is that it has given me less time to prepare for the new Hellblade podcast. So I was going through researching dev history and things like that. I've got some quotes. But I haven't been able to revisit the game itself yet. It's a short game. It's only 7 hours. So if I started right now, right, I could probably get through it. But the thing is that there's a whole element to talking about this game in terms of its kind of minor controversies that I want to discuss because there's a lot of nuance there. But it's going to mean that this is going to be 2 episodes instead of 1, which I'm okay with. I'm okay with this being 2 episodes. But the problem is that I think the best time to bring up the controversies would be at the end after we've already talked about the game, after everyone's already played through it, so that we can avoid spoilers. But I don't know if I'm going to have time to get through the game by tomorrow and have all my notes and things. Because there's still a bunch of stuff I was watching in the behind the scenes video that I wanted to take note of specifically in relation to some of the criticism of the game. And I don't know, man. I'm so... it is better to break it up, but that means that the part that I'm actually prepared to talk about is the following episode. Both. I don't really care so much about the permadeath thing. It's that's kind of whatever to me. It's more about how people with mental illness, some of them viewed this game as exploitative or perhaps invalidating. That's more of the meat and there's a lot of nuance in that conversation. It's going to take a lot of discussion to break through everything and try to give proper I guess weight to all different sides of that argument and to do it justice and to be fair. But that's stuff that I'm more prepared to talk about tomorrow when we film because that's what I've been researching and looking up and taking notes on. But I don't think that part of the conversation should happen until someone's finished the game. So it's if it's going to be broken up into 2 episodes, the first one should just be let's do our summary and, talk about execution and, scene by scene kind of breakdowns. And then episode 2 should be about more of the controversy stuff. But the first episode also needs to have a lot of this dev history in it. And so I'm not sure I'm not sure how to break this up and how to give myself an idea of where I should play up to for tomorrow. Oh, we could film them out of order, but the problem is that the final episode, it's about trying to keep a hold of our being ahead, right? It's like, sure, that would, like, we would be filming an episode for, what would that be? Next, like 3 weeks out from now, right? But that means that when we then film the next episode, which will be the one coming before it, that'll have to be edited like the week of again, which gets rid of the whole problem, or it reestablishes the whole problem of being a couple weeks ahead, right? What the heck? This is really weird. Okay, so while Raven insert Bridge of Helheim, the Odin trials, the blindness trial. I'm trying to think, like, what would halfway through the game be? The blindness trial's the part where, yeah, it's like it's totally dark. Part's crazy, dude. Maybe if I give myself something to shoot for, right? Like, how far into the game is this? If this is like 3 or 4 hours into the game, like, maybe I could play that far by tomorrow. I was actually listening to a podcast today about Y2K, a game that came out in 2019, and people calling that game exploitative too, about the controversies. And I feel like we just have a problem in this country of claiming to be victims when literally all stories are exploiting something to tell narrative. There's like yes, like that's kind of my initial reaction too. But I do think that some of these people have points. It's like they're not totally devoid of a point. And I want to be fair to that, because a lot of these people are trying to describe their experience with mental illness and the parts that they think are important to bring awareness of, like to create more awareness about, which is the learning how to live with it kind of a thing, right? And there are a couple points they make that I think are worth looking at. For instance, I think Dillion, who is Senua's like boyfriend or fiance in the story, he sort of talks about her voice hearing and her symptoms of psychosis as if it's like a gift, right? It's like a beautiful thing, like a gift that she's been given that gives her like strength to fight the darkness or something like that. And these people are saying, like, never has my mental illness or these symptoms benefited or been like a good thing, right? They've always been it's not ever been something where, like, oh, the voice gave me a warning about something, or like in any way was like a good thing, like a net positive thing. And to portray it that way is not reflective of like how this actually affects people, right? To try to like make it into positive. On the other hand, you could just say these are picked from like the early like, I don't know. I think this game takes place in like maybe like 1500 AD. What was it? No, not 1500. Like 1000 or 780. I don't know, something like that. And it's just they're doing their best to try to like, with the limited knowledge of what they can understand, thinking it's like a curse instead of like a mental illness, because they don't understand mental illness. An attempt for a person of that time to try to recontextualize it and like support her, right? And that's not necessarily the authors speaking through the character and saying like, oh, your mental illness is actually a beautiful thing, right? So anyway, there's a whole lot of things. Like, that's just like the tip of the iceberg, really. There's this article that was written on it that I want to read on the podcast and read some of the responses, comments, and things, because I do think it brings up some good points. But also, like, the game was originally written as, you know, kind of a typical hero's tale set in this, like, Norse, you know, mythology. That then, as they started to, like, develop the game, they decided to work in the psychosis angle. And, you know, some of the criticism is, like, this game was not written, the story was not written with psychosis in mind. Psychosis, like, plays second fiddle to the, like, the hero's tale that is not very, like, a good tool or a good story for bringing awareness to this thing, because it doesn't. Anyways, it's hard to explain, but it's stuff that's worth talking about. The thing is, it's going to take a long time to talk about it, and so it's going to make the episode into 2 episodes, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But it means that I have to play the game, like, really fast and take a lot of notes, because I have to record this tomorrow. So I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. What the fetch are you talking about? Yeah, that's fine. I don't care. But I also want to rewatch the special features. So there's a lot of good quotes in this that I wanted to take down as a response to some of the things that are brought up in that article. So I'm going to watch this and take my notes on it. And then I'm probably going to log off and go play the game on my PlayStation 4, which is at my place, and take my notes at home, instead of, like, watching the game here or downloading the Steam version back on my hard drive and playing it on stream. But anyway, if you have not played this game, you probably shouldn't watch this, just as, like, a fair spoiler warning. It will spoil some of the game. Yeah, as it says right here, it contains spoilers, right? You should watch it after playing the game, so that's what I would also recommend. But I'm going to kind of go through this, I think, now on stream and take a few extra notes, and then after that, I will log off and go try to play as much of this game as I can possibly get through tonight. And I guess at that point, see where we go from there. The only markers for progress in the game I recall are the runes you could find, and they'll fill in a circle. If you can find a video of someone having about half of those, that'd possibly be a good stop point. Yeah. Okay, anyways, let's get started on this. I'm going to put the subtitles on.
Stormy seas and lost souls.
Who is it?
She's dreamt of this before.
It's coming.
Hey, Alex.
Is it? Is it? Is it?
They say dreams are visions of our memories, thoughts, and fears, as seen by our inner eye. But what if each one of us is always dreaming, even when awake? And we only see what our inner eye creates for us. Is this what hell is? A world shaped by Senua's nightmares. Maybe that's why people fear seeing the world through our eyes.
Yes, she's scared.
Because if you believe that Senua's reality is twisted, you must accept that yours might be too.
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a video game about Senua, a Celtic warrior on a vision quest into Viking territory. But what sets our hero Senua apart is that she suffers from severe psychotic mental illness.
He knows she's getting closer. He can feel her coming closer. She's getting closer. They're watching.
The original idea for Hellblade was to create a classic hero's journey, a journey of suffering, but one where the fantasy world is not another planet or alternate universe, but a world that is constructed where the original idea for Hellblade was to create.
Alright, I'm going to take this quote down.
A classic hero's journey, a journey of suffering, but one where the fantasy world is not another planet or alternate universe, but a world that is constructed in Senua's mind. But to do so would mean putting psychotic mental illness at the center of the experience. A subject that is still considered taboo, and a challenge that was both terrifying and
Okay, got that quote. Gonna make this one be bed.
exciting in equal measure. In Hellblade, the starting point was a newly discovered Celtic goddess called Senuna.
I need to make a note on this too.
Exciting in equal measure. In Hellblade, the starting point was a newly discovered Celtic goddess called called Senuna in Ashwell, Hertfordshire. When first discovered, her name was thought to be Senua, and
Okay, got that quote.
a name which I liked and kept. I wondered if Senua might have been a Celtic warrior like Boudica who stood up to the Romans.
Okay, Boudica, I gotta look this up. Boudica was... the queen of the British, I don't know how to say this, Iceni tribe, who led an uprising against the conquering forces of the Roman Empire in AD 60 or 61. According to Roman sources, shortly after the uprising failed, she poisoned herself or died of her wounds. Then I'll put the link to that right there.
Senua might have been a Celtic warrior like Boudica who stood up to the Romans. While the Romans had conquered all of Europe, there was a group of Celts up in...
See, Alex says, how was getting to the end of Tactics? I mean, did the playthrough with Kaysen bring you any new perspective on the game? Yeah, I mean, like, certainly, there were things I noticed that I hadn't seen before, things that I had forgotten that were really strengthened by that ending. I think you were on the podcast where I was watching the ending, right? With Delita stabbing Ovelia and stuff. It kind of more or less strengthened, or like just sort of reinforced things I already felt about it. But yeah, I mean, our final episode is like 4 hours long, so there's quite a lot we try to get through on the final episode of FF Tactics. There's a lot of stuff to talk about.
In the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire that could not be conquered, the Picts. And so the Romans built a wall called Hadrian's Wall that spans across Britain from sea to sea to keep the Pictish barbarians.
Hadrian's Wall.
At bay. The Picts were known for their war paint, painted on with woad, and their matted hair clumped with lime. And so Senua would be a barbarian Pict in this image.
What's your name?
Senua.
I haven't seen you before.
I don't live home much.
Oh, Zeno's daughter.
I have to go.
Wait!
Orkney is off the coast of Scotland and was inhabited by the Picts, steeped in history and mystery, and so I made Orkney Senua's home and set the stage for a crisis. In the late 8th century, the first Vikings landed on the Orkney Islands, The population of the Picts crashed thereafter, replaced by the Norsemen of the 9th century. Were they wiped out? We don't know for sure, but it would seem likely given the reputation of the Vikings.
Let's see. Excuse me. Eighth century. Got it.
Vikings landed on the Orkney Islands. The population of the Picts crashed thereafter, replaced by the Norsemen of the 9th century. Were they wiped out? We don't know for sure, but it would seem likely given the reputation of the Vikings. The Northmen's brutality is legendary. High-ranking leaders and chieftains of the tribes they conquered were often offered as sacrifice to their gods. The most brutal of these sacrifices was known as the Blood Eagle. I imagine Senua as a young female warrior who returns home from exile to find her partner, Dillion, brutally sacrificed to a Norse god by these hellish warriors from a faraway land. I imagine the horror of this moment and how it would have dragged her deep into mental torment. Mad by I came to learn that the Celts had a sophisticated and nuanced perspective.
Okay, I gotta take this quote.
On the nature of mental disorder. One term they used was Gelt. A Gelt is a man or woman who has been driven mad by a curse, battle trauma, or grief. The Gelt would take to a life in the woods in search of penance, punishment, and purgation. And so Senua became a Gelt, cursed by darkness, looking for redemption in the wilds. Another word the Celts used in reference to mental disorders was truth. Meaning fool, or liar. One who utters the words of God. They tell of the mad sinner who flees battle into exile and takes takes on a beastly nature, growing feathers on his body. The character called Druth in Hellblade is based on a little-known person called Findan, an 8th century Irish Celt who was captured and enslaved by the Vikings, but eventually escaped to Orkney, where he became a monk.
Okay.
I will tell you my stories of hell, if I may walk with you.
Upon meeting Senua, it would be his stories that fuel her quest deep into their world of gods.
The Northmen say the world will come to an end. The sun will grow black, the earth will sink into the sea, the stars will disappear, fire and water will meet, flames will play against the sky, the heavens and earth and all the world will be burned, all the gods will be dead, and the warriors of Valhalla and people everywhere. Senua, prepare yourself for Ragnarok, for it is nigh.
So the stage was set for a new adventure, a journey into the Norse underworld called Hell, a vision quest fueled by madness and myth. A fantasy that was created by Senua's own mind, and one that we would experience through her eyes.
This is your mission. This is your quest. There is nothing else left.
To make a game about a warrior with psychotic mental illness as its central theme was fraught with danger. Mental illness such as psychosis is still taboo and rarely acknowledged in a century of cinema, never mind the new medium of games. Where it does feature, it often conflates psychosis and
There's a lot of good quotes in this.
mental illness such as psychosis is still taboo and rarely acknowledged in a century of cinema. Never mind the new medium of games. Where it does feature, it often conflates psychosis and psychopathy. associated with a lack of empathy. It is unfortunate that these two words sound so similar. That they are used interchangeably in media. I must admit that I didn't have to look very far to discover my own ignorance of the subject. So we reached out to Paul Fletcher, psychiatrist and professor of health neuroscience at University of Cambridge.
Psychosis is a descriptive term, and it refers to having a loss of contact with objective reality. So it's characterized by two main sets of symptoms. One of them is hallucinations, where somebody experiences perceptions when there is no actual objective thing out there to perceive.
You're already dead. Who are you?
And the other is delusions, where somebody comes to very often bizarre, unpleasant, frightening beliefs when there's no good evidence in favor of them.
There's no doubt about
Delusions with experience to a loss of contact with having a loss of contact with objective reality. So it's characterized by two main sets of symptoms. One of them is hallucinations. Where somebody experiences perceptions when there is no actual objective thing out there to perceive.
You're already dead. Who are you?
And the other is delusions, where somebody comes to very often bizarre, unpleasant, frightening beliefs when there's no good evidence in favor of them.
There's no doubt about it. The source of the darkness is in Helheim, and the goddess Hela holds his soul there.
We reached out to Wellcome, a biomedical research
I need to take that quote.
Beliefs when there's no good evidence in favor of them.
There's no doubt. thought about it. The source of the darkness is in Helheim, and the goddess Hela holds his soul.
Okay.
We reached out to Welcome, a biomedical research charity that spends billions on research and awareness programs aimed at improving health.
Mental health hasn't always been presented in the media.
Welcome, a biomedical
Welcome charity spends billions on research and awareness programs aimed at improving health. I'm gonna take that down.
research charity that spends billions on research and awareness programs.
Alex is asking, did Vagrant Story win the voting for the main podcast? Yes, it did.
It's aimed at improving health.
Mental health hasn't always been presented in the media in a way that is particularly helpful. It can be challenging to engage people with the subject matter, and there are a lot of preconceived ideas about mental health, and particularly schizophrenia and psychosis. So we hope our support allows the team to continue to collaborate with Paul Fletcher and with those who have experience of psychosis to create a game that provides a fresh perspective on the condition and allows audiences to allows the team to mental health and engage people with the subject matter in a way that is particularly helpful.
Spends billions on research and awareness programs aimed at improving health.
Mental health hasn't always been presented in the media in a way that is particularly.
Okay, who is saying this?
Helpful. It can be challenging. To engage people with the subject matter, and there are a lot of preconceived ideas.
Ian Dodgian, creative partner.
Ideas about mental health, and particularly schizophrenia and psychosis. So we hope Our support allows the team to continue to collaborate with Paul Fletcher and with those who have experience of psychosis to create a game that provides a fresh perspective on the condition. And allows audiences to engage with it in a way that just wouldn't be possible in any other.
Okay, what's this guy's name again? Whoa, Ian? Dodgian? Creative Partnerships Manager from Wellcome Trust.
Mental health, and particularly schizophrenia and psychosis. So we hope our support allows the team to continue to collaborate with Paul Fletcher and with those who have experience of psychosis to create a game that provides a fresh perspective on the condition and allows audiences to engage with it in a way that just wouldn't be possible in any other medium.
What started out as a brief consultation convinced me that we were only scratching the surface of an immensely deep and interesting subject that could enrich and change the very nature of the game.
That's cool. Thanks so much for coming in. Pleasure. Thanks. It's really interesting for me, and I'd love to be involved. I think it's fascinating. Absolutely.
Our understanding of psychosis is still very much a mystery, and ways of treating it are still primitive compared to physical illness. After all, it is easy to see the pain and suffering caused by physical disease. Or physical trauma. It is not so easy to see the mental suffering and trauma of severe mental illness. But what if we could find a way to see it? Games are capable of drawing you in. For hours on end, playing the role of a character who is different from you, experiencing their perspective, and actively involving you in a world that functions with a different set of rules.
That voice is not a kind. Use that voice. Calls you to your death. It's an evil voice.
If we were to represent Senua's psychosis.
Hey Rob, what's going on? Yeah, so I did, and that's really helpful. It's like extremely helpful that basically you've gotten that document started. I do think it'll be important to do a video like that, just like we did for FF Tactics. To get people prepared for that. So that's going to be really nice to like have that kind of like written up already and just like make some tweaks to it and be able to do a video on that. So I really appreciate that. That'll be awesome. I will probably be looking at that after I finish the top 50 video, which I'm going to try to get done by Monday. Because we still have the final episode of Tactics coming out next Wednesday, and then Senna was the next week, and then the week after that Monday would be the day that I would want that Vagrant Story video to go up. So I want to get the top 50 video out before that, either this Monday or next week sometime. Then I'll move on to that after that.
So we would have to simulate voice hearing, a common attribute. But how can we simulate something we have no first-hand experience of? Professor Charles Fernyhough, a leading expert in voice hearing from Durham University, offered his help.
Hearing voices is an experience that is usually associated with severe mental illness, and crucially we know that hearing voices is a part of ordinary life for many people who don't meet the criteria for mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, that's not him in real life.
We know voices vary according to where they appear in space. Voices can appear far away in the distance, they can appear right there in your ear, they can seem to be coming from inside your head.
Based on the information Professor Fernyhough provided, I put together a sound brief and invited some actors.
I might actually want to bring up my own experience on that, because, like I obviously don't suffer from these symptoms, but I've had an episode of this kind before.
Something we have no first-hand experience of. Professor Charles Fernyhough, a leading expert in voice hearing from Durham University. Offered his help.
Hearing voices is an experience that is usually associated with severe mental illness, and crucially we know that hearing voices is a part of ordinary life. For many people who don't meet the criteria for mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, that's not him in real life.
We know voices vary. According to where they appear in space, voices can appear far away. In the distance, they can appear right there in your ear, they can seem to be coming from inside your head.
Based on the information Professor Fernyhough provided, I put together a sound brief and invited some actors to the studio. We recorded the actors using a binaural microphone, which records the 3D spatial position of sound, replicating the way sound is heard by human ears. It gives you an incredible sense that the person you are listening to is right there beside you. Rachel Waddingham from the Voice Collective came to our studio with 2 young voice hearers to speak to our team. We talked at length about their experiences and they listened to our tests, giving us feedback on how we could improve on it.
Everyone hates her. She's cursed.
It's very hard to.
Rob says, I was shocked to come across the new Ultimania translation for Dev History. Oh yeah, I did see you were talking about that. It literally only came out last month. The Smupulation site had some really good tactics articles too. That's the ones I've seen. I've read most everything from Smupulations. I'm pretty sure like most of the Vagrant Story quotes that I have came from that website. So in fact, I want to say a lot of quotes came from Ultimania too. There wasn't like an official release, like a document, like a digital document released with the translations, but there was, what was it? I know I'll find the source if I do this. Go to the development section. So from the development team, interview, preview comic book. What is this one? So this is what you're talking about. I can start products. Okay. Yeah, so it's this, right? This is the site where I got a lot of these quotes. But it's like translated from Japanese, but I think these are from the Ultimania. I think. They were just also put onto this website. I mean, you would have taken a look at the Ultimania stuff most recently, so you'd be able to confirm or deny whether this is the same stuff, but this is like where I got all my quotes and things for the Vagrant Story retrospective. I would just click on a different guy, and then he has his whole section. But I think this came from the Ultimania. It was just translated by this guy on this website. Because it has like a whole bunch of devs on this. Yes, Sakimoto, composer, right? Now, I remember another interview with Sakimoto where I got his quotes. Because he talked about trying to write it to sound like the X-Files, you know, which is not appearing here. So I got that from somewhere else. May just be a retranslation then, but very clearly made out. Let's see. So this Smupulations article is the developer interviews from the Ultimania. Okay, let's see actually. Because if I go back, see if this is the same. Actually, it looks like it's different. Hold on. That's talking about ogre battle. Quest stuff. Yeah, I do remember reading that he wanted to be a filmmaker. I don't remember. He must have said that somewhere else. Okay, well, this will be a good thing to look at the time that we do that. I want to choose another folder. I don't want it to be Vagrant Story. There we go. Save that for later.
To represent what this experience is like, partly because it's such a personal, intense, emotional experience. It's testament to how Ninja Theory have been listening to what the researchers are saying, but also crucially listening to the experts by experience. What they've come up with is so compelling. It's by far the best representation I've heard of what these experiences are like.
Other common attributes of psychosis are visions and flashbacks. We met with Recovery College East, who work with and care for people recovering from severe mental disorders. College East, who work other common.
Thank you.
Common attributes of psychosis are visions and flashbacks. We met with Recovery College East, who work with and care for people recovering from severe mental disorders. A group of service users gave us their first-hand account of what they experience.
Sometimes when the visions or what we're seeing is too much, it becomes more difficult until eventually we perhaps don't see anything.
The people we spoke to, the stories they told, were fascinating, harrowing, and mind-boggling. The reality of what people experienced was vivid, far exceeding what I could possibly have imagined. We went away itching to represent some of these visions and flashbacks in the game.
As we all know, my heart is so, love is so far away. Don't you know how I wanna feel deeper? I could never know how you grow, all these days are killing me. Now I see deep in me, insanity does unfold. I just wanna feel deeper, deeper. I just wanna feel deeper, deeper. As we all know, my heart is so, love is so far away.
See you, Rob.
Don't you know how I wanna feel deeper? I could never know how you grow, all these days are killing me. Feel like this, read like this, I just wanna live that song. I just wanna feel deeper, deeper. I just wanna feel deeper, deeper.
To refine our work, we continue to hold meetings with Recovery College East over the course of a year and a half. Showing them what we had achieved so far and refining the in-game representation. Based on their feedback. With their help, flashbacks, visions, and changes in perception were woven into the story and gameplay of Senua.
The students that are involved in this project are incredibly excited about being involved. They have described the experience as being important because it values their lived experience. And
alright, I want to get this quote for sure. This is from Tracy Bartlett, Recovery College East.
excited about being involved. They have described the experience as being important because it values their lived experience and shows that despite what we have been through, all of that experience becomes valid, that actually it's something that we should all be talking.
This was Tracy.
Because it values their lived experience and
the story and gameplay of Senua.
the students that are involved in this.
Tracy
This project are incredibly lived experience, and shows that despite what we have been through, all of that experience becomes valid, that actually it's something that we should all be talking about.
The experiences described range from beautiful to frightening beyond comprehension. I heard of a girl who has to live with an angry voice screaming at her, slamming on her doors and walls 24 hours a day. I met someone who would often see hanging corpses in a room, so real that she would sometimes try to rescue them. The panic and fear that comes with such visions is entirely understandable, and it can be a living horror for some.
Worthless, weak, pathetic. Go on, feel sorry for yourself, because there is no one left to do that for you.
I was urged by one fellow that we should not shy away from showing this horror, and so I was perpetually torn in making Hellblade. Had we gone not shy away from showing this horror.
That for you.
I was urged by one fellow that we should not shy away from showing this horror. And so I was perpetually torn in making Hellblade. Had we gone too far with our representations, or not far enough?
Broken and lost. Just like your soul.
Come on.
In some ways, voice hearing and visions were the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. There's another aspect of psychosis that is much harder to explain, but one that I think video games are uniquely able to represent, which are often called delusions.
People begin to see patterns in the world. They begin to link things that most people wouldn't link. Most of the things that we might think would be coincidence or, not worth commenting on. Nevertheless, that might have a particular salience or importance for them.
One individual described how everyday words, sounds, colours and objects were steeped in meaning to him, forming a strange and sinister puzzle that he was determined to solve but could not quite. Sinister colours
might think would be coincidence or, not
illusions.
People begin to see
This
happens in the world. They begin to link things that most people wouldn't link. Most of the things that we might think would be coincidence or, not worth commenting on. Nevertheless, that might have a particular salience or importance for them.
One individual described how everyday words sound. Colours and objects were steeped in meaning to him, forming a strange and sinister puzzle. That he was determined to solve but could not quite get to the bottom of.
It's not just brain dysfunction, it's not like the system shut down. It's actually an incredibly creative process. The person creates a world populated with it's not like the system shut down. It's actually an incredibly creative process. The person creates a world populated with voices and phantasms. Terrors, and they're completely immersed in it. They believe in it.
We often invite people into the studio to play the game. In one of our playtests, they played through much of the game, making associations between runes, secret messages, and the threat of darkness that stalked them. There are many things that happen in the world of Hellblade that make perfect sense within the context of Senua's mind. The dark rot that's killing her slowly from within, the secret runes of the gods that block her path to Helheim, and strange associations that exist in the game to confuse you. To complete Senua's quest, you have to internalize and accept the logic and meaning behind these things to progress. Afterwards, they said that they didn't see much evidence of mental illness in the game. People with delusions of all sorts would argue the same thing, that they are not aware of their experience being abnormal in any way.
I need a soul.
That they didn't see much evidence. evidence of mental illness in the game. People with delusions of all sorts would argue the same thing, that they are not aware of their experience. As being abnormal in any way.
I need this sword. It's important.
Representing perception changes and thinking patterns within Hellblade gives us a set of symptoms common in psychosis. But people with lived experience were keen to emphasize another point, that it is wrong to define a person by their symptoms. But people with lived experience were keen to emphasize another point, that it is wrong to define a person by their symptoms. Quite often, the illness comes not from the symptoms, but from the stigma, isolation and mistreatment that comes about from the rest of society.
They say that I'm cursed. What if they're right?
I needed someone to portray Senua, someone who could believably internalize her suffering. Melina Jurgens, our video editor, had been a stand-in for Senua over a few months while we perfected our motion capture techniques. Without realizing it, for a few months while we perfected our motion capture techniques. Without realizing it, she had already auditioned for the role, and I knew her well enough to know that I didn't have to teach her to act, but to relive her own internal pain. As often is the case, those who have suffered mental anguish are never far from us. My hope is that by creating a compelling and aspirational character in Senua who feels very much real, character in Senua who feels very much real, albeit in a fantasy setting, we can provide a lens into her reality, a different one to yours. And this is where storytelling comes into play. I imagined her life based on common threads in real people's lives. She was always prone to psychosis as a child. Her mother Galina also heard voices and had visions, so perhaps there was a genetic aspect. Or perhaps it was cultural, as she lived within a world without science, of gods and a superstition. As exemplified by her druid father Zimble. Psychosis developed in her late teens to early 20s and was exasperated by stigma and isolation at the hands of the clansmen and her father.
This darkness, it's spreading.
The trauma of seeing her lover Dillion sacrificed tips her over the edge, making her remodel her reality around a concept that connects. Everything. The darkness. So the question is, what Senua experiences real can only be answered by saying, yes, it is real. It is her reality.
All of her suffering will have been for nothing. It's just a matter of time.
Towards the end of the project, service users and professionals that had collaborated with us were invited to see the near final final game. It was a chance to see if the game had reflected their views or if it had misrepresented them.
For me, being involved in especially developing Senua's character. Has been really important, and being able to bring in my perspective and what I see and what I hear, and having that built into the game has been a real privilege. It's gritty and it's meaty. And there are some tough subjects in there that are being tackled with honesty.
I was blown away by it today, absolutely blown away. It was just fantastic to get the opportunity to use our lived experience in a very creative way. There's nothing tokenistic about the work we've put in. It feels like we've been listened to, things have been taken on board, and I think there was a lot of realism in the game itself, and it feels very authentic.
Hellblade will give people a good experience of what it's like to hear a voice. Voices and have those experiences. I'm glad that the guys at Ninja Theory and have asked us to come along and help them build an experience that's positive when it comes out, and get myself a copy and have a go.
I think all the way through I was really inspired by how the conversations have translated into the game in a way that I think I didn't imagine was possible. So wonderful, really wonderful.
I really hope that others will follow the lead they've set and use the power of something like a video game to change people's perceptions, to increase understanding. Use the power of something like a video game. To change people's perceptions, to increase understanding, and ultimately to make some of the stigma around voice hearing and other experiences go away.
For me, it was really exciting to see something that I explore scientifically being represented so beautifully in a character who's trying to penetrate the mysteries of the environment in which they've been placed, with all of this strange uncertainty and noise and conflicting information that they're getting. I'm very excited by this way of trying to represent mental illness, because I think it actually might be offering us insights that we wouldn't get from pure scientific explorations, and actually giving us insights that we wouldn't get. I'm very excited. By this way of trying to represent mental illness, because I think it it actually might be offering us insights that we wouldn't get from pure scientific exploration. Explorations and actually giving us quite an empathic view of what it might be like.
Mental illness has been with us for as long as we have been on this planet, but why? Why hasn't evolution stamped out this weakness from within our gene pool? I often pondered this question until I realized that the question had an inbuilt flaw. It assumes that being and thinking differently is a weakness. The only reason we have computers, spacecraft, medicine, poetry, art, and yes, even video games is because individuals are able to simulate new abstract realities in their minds and share them with the rest of us. We need people to be willing to see differently in order for us to progress and survive as society. And we need to be open to these new ways of seeing. And it is this spirit that motivated me to create Senua's story and share it with you.
Pure scientific exploration, quite an empathic what it might be.
Mental illness has been with us for as long as we have been on this planet, but why? Why hasn't evolution stamped out this weakness from within our gene pool? I often pondered this question until I realized that the question had an inbuilt flaw. It assumes that being and thinking differently is a weakness. The only reason we have computers, spacecraft, medicine, poetry, art, and yes, even video games is because individuals are able to simulate new abstract realities in their minds and share them with the rest of us. We need people to be willing to see differently in order for us to progress and survive as society. And we need to be open to these new ways of seeing. And it is this spirit that motivated me to create Senua's story and share it with you.
Wow, what a slow website. See, Alex is saying, this is the last time I'll bring up FFT, I swear, but I was watching this week's podcast, or last week's podcast the other day, and I got myself thinking about Wygraf and Gefgarian's thematic role in the story. I noticed a double reflection happening, one between Wygraf and Delita, and the other between Ramza and Gefgarian. Wygraf tries to change the system, like Delita, but he isn't willing to give up his principles and moral code in the process. Gefgarian, like Ramza, put himself out of the system, meaning he doesn't seek to promote or fight against any of the figures of the power that controls it. Differently from Ramza, he sells his principles to achieve pleasures that it can provide. Ramza needed to preserve his principles to truly escape from the corrupt system he was in, while Delita had to break his own to change that system. In parallel, both Gefgarian and Wygraf meet tragic endings. Does it make sense to you? It makes perfect sense. I think it's really astute observation. So it's actually, you should put that in a comment in the next video that comes out. You know, like pin it or something. Ugh. So this is like, you can do a screening or a test to see okay. All right, so I've gotten through that. Good to go there. I'm probably going to log off for now, but I'm going to go play the game and try to get as far into it as I can tonight. But hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to put together a good episode. We'll see. We'll see what I can do. All right, guys. Appreciate you as always. I will stream again probably Friday night, thereabouts. And hopefully we can get that top 50 video done. That's what I'm going to be aiming for. So see you guys then. Peace out.